Welcome to XRP Pro Ledger, and today we need to address something directly before we get into the data, because the document was published on April 1st, 2026, and the first reaction across the market was that it had nothing to do with XRP. Multiple analysts, multiple voices, multiple platforms all looked at the headline numbers and concluded that Ripple's G Treasury announcement was a traditional corporate treasury product with no meaningful connection to the digital asset. And then someone found the integration document, the specific language inside that document, cross-border intercompany settlement and liquidity management using XRP and RLUSD, is not community interpretation. It is Ripple's own technical language confirmed in writing on April 1st of this year. Stay with this analysis until the end, because when you place that integration document next to Stanford University's valuation model of the DTCC, which produced $817 per XRP from a single switch before SWIFT, before derivatives, before tokenization, the number that emerges from the complete picture is the most structurally significant data point this market has seen in this cycle. Let us start with the psychological pattern that this market repeats at every major inflection point, because understanding it is the only way to position correctly ahead of it. Every time Ripple publishes an integration announcement, the immediate retail reaction follows the same sequence. The headline is read, the headline does not mention XRP directly. The conclusion is formed, this has nothing to do with XRP, and then days or weeks later, the footnote is found. The integration document surfaces. The technical language confirms what the headline obscured, and the investors who dismissed the announcement on day one are now buying into a market where the informed capital has already been positioned for weeks. This is not a new pattern. It has repeated across every major Ripple partnership announcement, every regulatory development, and every institutional product launch. The G Treasury announcement is the latest iteration of a pattern that this channel has been mapping with precision. The retail dismissal of the G Treasury announcement was understandable given the headline framing. Ripple published three numbers for their G Treasury platform: 100% cash visibility, 13,000 connected banks, and $12.50 trillion in annual payments volume. On the surface, those numbers describe a traditional corporate treasury management solution. They describe a product that Fortune 500 companies use to manage their cash positions, their intercompany transfers, and their cross-border payment obligations. Nothing in that headline framing suggests a direct connection to a digital asset. But the integration document published on April 1st, 2026, contains language that changes the entire analytical framework. Cross-border intercompany settlement, liquidity management, XRP and RLUSD as the designated settlement mechanism. $12.5 trillion in annual corporate treasury flow is now moving through infrastructure that Ripple has specifically designed to settle using XRP. The valve has been opened, the plumbing connects directly to the ledger. Brad Garlinghouse addressed the analytical framework that explains every Ripple product decision in a documented interview, and his language is worth reading with precision. He stated that even when a Ripple product does not appear to have a direct line from point A to point B, the path may run from point A to point B to point C, and that everything Ripple builds is in service of expanding liquidity, utility, and trust in XRP. That framework is not marketing language. It is an operational blueprint for how Ripple sequences institutional adoption. RLUSD was designed as a door opener, a mechanism for bringing institutional treasury desks into the XRP ledger ecosystem at a lower perceived risk threshold before the full on-demand liquidity deployment follows. G Treasury is point A to point B. The XRP on-demand liquidity integration that activates when institutions are comfortable with the infrastructure is point C. The April 1st document confirmed that the path from B to C has been formally connected. Now let us address the Stanford valuation model directly, because it is the most rigorous external academic quantification of XRP's price at institutional deployment scale that exists in the public record. Stanford's methodology was precise and conservative. The framework took the DTC's documented annual processing volume $4.70 quadrillion and applied a structured valuation approach using a 5-year timeline, a 5% discount rate, and the confirmed circulating supply of 61.68 billion XRP, one integration, one use case, one institution, zero SWIFT volume, zero cross-border payments network, zero derivatives market exposure, zero tokenization pipeline. The output from that single variable model was $817 per XRP. That number is not a community price target. It is not a social media speculation, it is the output of a documented academic valuation framework applied to confirmed institutional processing volume. And it accounts for exactly one of the switches that are currently confirmed and operational. The switch sequence that emerges when you map the confirmed integrations in order is the analytical framework that the current market price does not reflect. Switch 1 is the DTCC integration through Ripple Prime. Stanford's model produces $817 from this switch alone. Switch 2 is G Treasury's $12.50 trillion in annual corporate treasury flow, confirmed on April 1st with XRP and RLUSD as the designated settlement mechanism, not yet incorporated into any published price model, but structurally additive to the DTCC baseline. Switch 3 is the 13,000 bank treasury infrastructure documented in Ripple's own platform numbers connected, not yet at full deployment velocity, but the architecture is live. Switch 4 is RLUSD's function as a synthetic US central bank digital currency, private digital money backed by US Treasury instruments, moving through Federal Reserve rails via Finastra's FedNow access. Every RLUSD transaction on the XRP ledger generates direct demand for XRP as the underlying settlement asset. David Schwartz's EVM sidechain strategy represents Switch 5 in the confirmed sequence, and the precision of his public explanation deserves careful analysis. Schwartz was explicit that Ripple's objective is not to convert the XRP ledger into an Ethereum competitor. The core ledger settlement speed, transaction cost structure, and institutional reliability are non-negotiable properties that define its value to banking infrastructure partners. What the EVM sidechain accomplishes is the addition of programmable smart contract capability, trust-minimized bridging, interoperability solutions, and institutional DeFi applications without altering the base layer properties that make the XRP ledger viable as a global settlement infrastructure. The sidechain brings smart contract capital flows into the XRP ecosystem while preserving the architectural integrity that institutional risk managers require. Each switch is confirmed, each switch is documented, and Stanford's $817 output accounts for only the first one. The derivatives market dimension of this analysis represents the largest unpriced switch in the confirmed sequence. The global derivatives market processes approximately $1.20 quadrillion in annual volume, larger than the DTCC by multiple orders of magnitude. XRP's 3 to 5 second settlement finality and sub-cent transaction cost structure make it architecturally superior for derivatives collateral movement, margin transfers, TUITs, and intraday liquidity management, precisely the use cases that the CME Group's XRP derivatives listing has begun to open institutionally. When derivative settlement migrates to XRP infrastructure at any meaningful percentage of that $1.20 quadrillion in annual volume, the Stanford model's $817 baseline derived from DTCC alone becomes the smallest number in the analytical picture. The collateral movement use case alone, which the DTCC has identified as generating $100 million in daily losses for banks unable to move assets fast enough on volatile trading days, represents a confirmed pain point that XRP's settlement architecture directly resolves. The $90 trillion tokenization pipeline that the DTCC has specifically designated as a second half 2026 production readiness target adds a further dimension that no published price model has yet incorporated into a single integrated output. The tokenization of real-world assets, equities, bonds, real estate, commodities onto blockchain settlement rails requires a settlement layer that can process institutional transaction volume at the speed and cost profile that traditional asset managers require. The DTCC's own blockchain infrastructure partner confirmed that banks are losing $100 million per day when collateral movement cannot keep pace with market volatility. XRP settlement infrastructure is the specific architectural solution to that daily loss figure. Every tokenized asset that settles through XRP inclusive infrastructure creates direct, measurable demand for XRP as the settlement layer, and none of that demand has been priced into the current market structure. The RLUSD synthetic central bank digital currency dimension reframes the entire regulatory positioning of what Ripple has built inside the US financial architecture. The model Ripple has constructed private digital money backed at 105% by US Treasury instruments moving through Federal Reserve payment rails via Finastra's FedNow integration, accessible to the 13,000 banking institutions connected to the G Treasury platform. Functions operationally as a US synthetic central bank digital currency without carrying that regulatory classification. Every institution that adopts RLUSD for treasury management is adopting XRP ledger infrastructure as their settlement backbone. The Federal Reserve's own interest rate environment is generating the yield on the treasury collateral that funds Ripple's liquidity incentive program for banking partners. The architecture is constructed so that the expansion of RLUSD usage is structurally inseparable from the expansion of XRP settlement demand. These are not parallel tracks, they are the same track. The complete picture that assembles from these confirmed data points is not a speculative narrative about future potential. It is a documented map of present infrastructure reality. Ripple's G Treasury platform processes $12.50 trillion annually, with XRP and RLUSD confirmed as the settlement mechanism in the April 1st integration document. Stanford's valuation framework produces $817 per XRP from DTC's $4.70 quadrillion alone. One switch, one institution, one use case before every other confirmed integration is counted. The EVM sidechain is live, RLUSD is moving through Federal Reserve rails, the derivatives switch is opening through CME Group infrastructure, the tokenization pipeline has a confirmed second half 2026 production target, and Brad Garlinghouse has stated on the public record that everything Ripple builds connects to XRP through paths that are never visible in the headline and always confirmed in the document. The integration was always in the footnote. On April 1st, 2026, the footnote said XRP and RLUSD. Stanford said one switch produces $817. The question this analysis leaves you with is straightforward. If the floor from a single switch is $817, what does the complete switch sequence produce when every confirmed integration is counted simultaneously? If this analysis changed how you're thinking about XRP, hit like and subscribe. I drop deep dive breakdowns like this twice a day to keep you ahead of the market.